What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. Well, it looks like out of nowhere, we have a bunch of remasters and a remake that are being rumored, and one even has now been confirmed by Ubisoft that, to be honest, adds a bit of a silver lining to the whole situation around the team with Prince of Persia being disbanded, but we'll go over all of that here today. Also, we are going to be talking about a certain feature for the PlayStation 5 that appears to be in flux and just outright not working correctly for some reason. And then we also have an update for Astro Bot when it comes to the sales anyway, because it does look like, at least for now, this 3D platformer is off to a good start. So if you guys enjoy these videos, make sure you hit that like button, helps it a ton. And if you're new here to the Spawnwave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. And of course, members for the channel do get Newswave early. If you would like to learn more about that, click the join button down below this video. And we're gonna start today with Monster Hunter Wilds, as there was a stream that took place yesterday. It wasn't very long, like 10 or 15 minutes. But in that stream, we actually had some big news for people who want to get their hands on the game as soon as possible. In fact, you better get your hands on the game as soon as next week. We can see this post up over on Gamatsu. Now, there are a few dates to go over here, so we're just gonna point them out directly. We have October 28th to the 30th. For PlayStation Plus members, there will be an open beta, or a beta test on the PS5, and then there's a full open beta test that will take place a few days later from October 31st to November 3rd. That'll work for PS5, Xbox Series, and PC via Steam, and it has crossplay, so that's actually pretty cool. Again, to just kind of get a feel for the game fairly early then, since it's releasing next year, well, in a few months technically then, but early 2025. And then on top of the open beta test information, we also have a couple of accessories. One, the controller here, that's this nice crimson red with some white etchings around the edges there, the handles, and also right in the touchpad. And then we also have some PS5 console plates. They appear to be set up for the slim line, and I guess then the PS5 Pro, as we understand it now, which would use the same plates. Unfortunately, from what I can tell, it's not available in the US, so if you want the controller or the plates, at least at this time, again, we could see an announcement later on that it becomes available in the US, you would have to look to import this one. But really, really cool stuff there for Monster Hunter fans, and I am interested in Monster Hunter Wilds just to see how it turns out, so I'll be checking in on this beta actually starting next week when it becomes available for PlayStation Plus members. Also, we did have reviews go live for Romancing Saga 2, the remake, which we can see over on Metacritic, currently sitting at an 80, which, okay, that's not bad. This is Romancing Saga 2, Revenge of the Seven. This would be a remake of the Super Famicom game from the early 90s. I think it was like 92 or 93. I'm not a big Romancing Saga person, but I know there is a kind of a cult following for this franchise, this series. And people were saying that this, so far, has turned out to be a good release for the title, and people do look back on Romancing Saga 2 specifically as being a good title to jump in for the franchise here, but it being at an 80, it's available today, actually, and again, it being a remake does make it a bit more approachable, I'm sure, for a lot of current gamers, so there you go. It's available on PlayStation, Nintendo, and then also, or Switch, and then also on PC, so check it out. Oh, and for Minecraft players who are currently on the PlayStation 4, there is now a native PlayStation 5 version that's available. This was actually updated on their website here, where it just says Minecraft now available for PlayStation 5. They say the native version of Minecraft is optimized to take advantage of the PS5's powerful hardware, so your game will have a greater render distance while still running in 4K resolution and 60 FPS, which they say seeing farther will definitely come in handy as you seek out ingredients for your bundles in hardcore mode. Again, that's available right now, and they do say that if you already have it, the Bedrock Edition on the PlayStation 4, you can just claim it for free. You just do that through the PlayStation Store on your PS5, logged in, and you'll just have your digital copy upgrade there waiting for you. So hey, again, big news for Minecraft fans out there who've been on the PS5, because I guess up until now, you've just been using the PS4 version of the game. I'm sure people do comparisons, see how big of a deal it is for that rendering distance, but in a game like Minecraft where you're building stuff out and you're looking over, I assume, just vast stretches of land to see what you've created, probably fairly important there, especially when you want to hold that 60 FPS while you're doing all of it. So there you go. You can claim that one today for free. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with a remake and then also some remasters, which will actually get started with the remake because it is an update to the story from yesterday that had to do with the team behind Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown being disbanded, because that was obviously bad news in general, and they did have the sequel that was denied. I would have liked to have seen what else they could have done with that 2D Metroidvania style in like the Prince of Persia world, But nonetheless, we are, of course, sitting here now hearing that a lot of the talent has been moved on to other projects. And, well, the assumption is probably the bulk of them being moved to something like Assassin's Creed, because that's proven to be successful for Ubisoft. Well, it appears there's one other project going on within Ubisoft right now, and Insider Gaming had the scoop we can see. They say former Prince of Persia team members have migrated to other projects. One is working on a Rayman remake. Per their sources close to the situation, the unannounced Rayman remake is under development with the codename Project Steambot. And it's being pieced together by a team located primarily at Ubisoft Milan. The studio has directly contributed to the creation of more than 24 Ubisoft games over a 20-year window. Now, after this report ran from Insider Gaming, it does appear Kotaku reached out and was able to get a response from Ubisoft, and they basically confirm that there's exploration going on right now within the Rayman brand. They say, we are pleased to confirm Ubisoft Montpellier and Ubisoft Milan have recently started an exploration phase on the Rayman brand. This was in response from a Ubisoft spokesperson in an email to Kotaku. The project is still in its early stages, and we will share more details later. Now, it's not shocking to hear that Ubisoft would be pursuing a remake for something like Rayman, since we already hear about how there is a remake for Assassin's Creed Black Flag in the background right now there, and of course they're doing Splinter Cell. We hear when it comes to risk versus how much these games cost, little more risk off in terms of brand new IPs that could cost hundreds of millions of dollars. And can we look back on games that, I mean, for Rayman, 2025 is gonna be what, 20 or 30 years old? Hard to believe, I know. 30 years old technically, since it was 1995. So yeah, okay, 30th anniversary. That actually makes quite a bit of sense to go that route, you know, to say, okay, we're going to celebrate with a remake of the Rayman game from, I remember on the PS1, but it's also, if it's early stages now, it feels like it wouldn't be ready for the 30th anniversary, but even just an announcement at that time, so next year, I think would also just work well. And based on what we've seen the Rayman team really able to do over the past several releases, I do think it'd be really cool for them to go back, get the original one, and just do a full remake on it, and bring it up to, we'll say, modern expectations for games now, especially with just 2D platformers, and again, what they've learned from the previous entries. And there are many people who have just never played the first Rayman game, so yeah, I'm on board with that one. I think it'd be awesome to see, and well, it's definitely better than the team behind Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown being completely disbanded and sent off to a bunch of things like Assassin's Creed or the next Ghost Recon or something. At least this would be more of a creative endeavor, one that feels a bit different from the Ubisoft formula we've grown accustomed to with a lot of these big 3D open world style games. I'm on board for a new Rayman, even though it's a new or remake Rayman that will probably be new to a lot of people. Just seems like we're a ways off from it, but good to hear at least there's something like that going on within Ubisoft right now. Next up, let's move over to some of these remasters that are currently rumored, and apparently these would be coming from Nintendo, seeking out third-party publishers to bring some of their old titles over to the current Switch for 2025. Now, we can see this is posted up. This is over on the Gaming Leaks forum for Reddit. This is over on the Gaming Leaks and Rumors subreddit, and they're actually quoting PH Brazil's video here, and this made the rounds very, very fast online, and I think I know why, because you look at some of the games that are mentioned here. Anyway, they do mention some third-party games that'll get remasters on Switch 1 in 2025 as part of an initiative from Nintendo to court third parties and help compensate for Nintendo's own internal teams being too busy with the Switch 2. These games include, which they have multiple publishers here, Ubisoft, EA, Bandai Namco, and then apparently a big Western third-party publisher. But the only company that they are naming titles for is Ubisoft, which makes you think that's probably where some of their a good bit of their sourcing is. But either way, they name Splinter Cell Blacklist, which that was on the Wii U anyway, but sure, okay, technically they could port that up to the Switch. Rayman 3, Driver 1 and 2, and potentially Driver San Francisco down the line. And then 2 more unnamed titles under consideration. I gotta tell you, I saw Driver 1 and 2 and I was taken aback a bit. I was like, really? That That would actually be kind of cool. I mean, look, Driver 2, I remember back on the PS1, when that came out, it was a big deal because you could get out of your car, and it sounds so dumb now because we have so many open world games where you just get in a car, drive around, get out of it, and Grand Theft Auto's been doing it over and over and over again for decades now. But back then on the PS1, that was a legitimate game changer. I just remember experiencing that really for the first time with Driver 2. Now, the game also had these really weird difficulty spikes that were quite annoying, but still, it was such an interesting title at that time. I don't think it would age well at all for current audiences, and if it's like a smaller remaster, they move it over and it kind of fix up some of the resolution and, of course, the look of the game. I think it'd be a fun, like, $20 purchase, but I would not look at that as, ooh, big $60 game for the current Switch. Now, Nintendo going to different third parties and trying to get them to, or publishers trying to get them to move games over, some we wouldn't expect, isn't new. Like, that's something we've seen pretty much for the entirety of the Switch. It was a big deal at first with the system because it was this handheld dock hybrid that was still pretty new and fresh, and you would see a game, go to it and be like, wait a minute, that title I played during the Xbox 360 and the PS3 era is now a handheld game, and it was kind of mind-blowing. It's just, we've gotten so used to it now, it's just kind of like, oh yeah, that's kind of cool. But like, Deadly Premonition was such a out-of-left-field announcement that it's really hard to surprise me anymore. But I will say, Driver 2 popping up, that would kind of catch me off guard a bit, but it just seems like a way for them to continue filling out 2025 while their primary focus is on the Switch 2, which they've said themselves they're going to announce before the end of this current fiscal year, which gives them up until March 31st, 2025. So actually not that much longer technically, what, about 5 months or so, so time's ticking, and seems like they want to get some remasters, at least according to PH Brazil, ready to go for the current Switch, just for that cross-gen period that inevitably will last 2, maybe even 3 years. Next up, let's talk about a feature for the PlayStation 5 that's either been forgotten about by Sony or is just currently broken at this time. It's kind of hard to tell technically as to where they are with it, but I want to give credit to Mystic Ryan as he did post up this video yesterday. He went really in depth with the whole thing, so check that out if you're somebody who's trying to figure out what the deal is with these activity cards. And by the way, a lot of dedication here from Ryan, so again, I have to point it out since whenever he's recording these videos and you look up, it's like 3:40 in the morning on his PS5 dashboard, so a lot of dedication over there from Ryan. But essentially what we're seeing right now are those activity cards don't really seem to work like they were originally advertised when the PlayStation 5 was first coming out, which really, if you haven't used them, I mean, when you go into like your dashboard for your game, you're about to pick it, you'll have cards that will come up in the guide button or just right down there below the game. And you can decide if you want to jump in for 10 or 15 minutes, which it'll tell you how long something is, like a speed run, for example. In Astro, Playroom specifically, I remember that was one that people were at least using it for, or using it in like Spider-Man or it would jump you into that activity. It would skip the splash screen, the startup screen, everything, and then you'd be off and running, and then the idea was you could then jump back out and get it all done in like 10 or 15 minutes, kind of like pick up and play. Unfortunately, right now, it doesn't seem to be the case with activity cards. It just sort of throws you to the typical start screen, and that's kind of it. So it's hard to say what's going on here. I mean, it's not a secret that people don't really use activity cards as much seemingly as Sony was hoping. Like, do you ever really hear anyone talk about them? I don't. And actually, I ran a poll about this just to see how many people were really using activity cards, and we'll get to that in a little bit because one of the options was, what's an activity card? So a few ways to look at that is Sony maybe didn't do the best job continuing to tell people that that was a thing, and maybe they themselves got data that was like, wow, okay, people really aren't on board with this as much as we thought, so let's pivot off of that and focus on other things for the OS level, because that's still a lot of real estate being taken up in the options menu for games on the dashboard. What else can we put there? But they've also been kind of breaking the OS recently with some of their updates, so I guess it's possible that this is just an error that's happened from some of the recent updates and they'll eventually fix it. Although Ryan did point out that there was an update that actually talked about the activity cards somewhat and fixing something else. So maybe they're just not really implementing it as much anymore because their time could be spent elsewhere. But we'll see if we get any update on that. But yeah, if you've been wondering about activity cards, seems like they're just not working outright, and it might just be because Sony realizes it's not worth it. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about Astro Bot, as we got some new sales data for the game that I think shows it's off to a pretty good start. Now, this would be the Circana results for the month of September. These would be sales in the US, some boxed only, some boxed and digital, which we can look at here. This was shared over on Blue Sky, a bit different there. Nice to say something other than Twitter X for once when it comes to social media, but we can see this was actually shared by Matt Piscatella there. And these are, we'll just do the top 10, although you can see the whole top 20 slide that he shared here. EA Sports FC 25, no surprise there that that's the #1 game. It typically is around this time when it releases. But then look right behind it, number 2, actually even above Madden 25 right now, is Astro Bot. I think that's actually pretty impressive, or pretty good, I would say, for Astro Bot in general. As right below that, Madden NFL 25, The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom. You notice the little star next to it? That's because this only counts physical over the counter sales, since Nintendo does not share their digital sales with them. Then EA Sports College Football 25, Star Wars Outlaws, NBA 2K 25, same deal there when it comes to digital for tracking. Hogwarts Legacy, NHL 25, and then God of War Ragnarok rounding out the top 10. So Astro Bot, I think at number 2 is a great start for a game that I think there are expectations from Sony that's like, hey, if this thing sells a couple million copies based on the budget and the scope we had at Team Asobi, that's pretty good. Like, I think they'd be happy with that. And again, a lot of this goes towards the idea of building strong intellectual properties, just brands in general for the long haul. I think Astro, just in general, could be a good intellectual property for them even outside of video games, because it does appeal to a large general audience. It's not like the mature rated, like dark, gritty style game with murder everywhere and that. It's again, a more G-rated, fun experience. And that's something that I think speaks to many, many people out there. And it's one of the reasons I'll be curious to see how Astro Bot does over the holidays, as it will be sitting next to the PlayStation 5 that appears to be getting some pretty good discounts for things like Black Friday coming up next month, but then just throughout the month of December into January, how it'll go as people are buying systems for the holidays and presents. Will Astro Bot also go with it? Will it be taken off the shelf and, okay, we're going to package this with it? Because Playroom, of course, is on the PS5 out of the box. So maybe people will discover it there, and then also maybe they'll move on to just Astro Bot in general. And this could be a game that has a fairly long tail in terms of sales for years to come. And I think if Astro Bot eventually gets to like a 3 or 4 million sale mark, that'd be great, because I think that means Sony is actually making a decent amount of money on that game, and would make sense for them to continue pursuing more Astro Bot in the future with Team Asobi, who, I mean, come on, that's one of the most one of the most creative studios that Sony has right now, that actually can work within a more manageable budget and scope, and actually release cadence. So here's hoping Astro Bot continues to sell, because I would like to see quite a bit more from Team Asobi. And before we go to the comment of the day, we'll take a look at the poll that I posted up yesterday, where I ask, if you own a PS5, do you use activity cards for games? 65% say, what's an activity card? And that's what I mean. I just, Sony, they showed it at first, and I remember they talked about it in like a blog post and stuff when the PS5 was first coming up, the big marketing push, the ramp up for it, but they kind of stopped after that. So it's not shocking to me to see that 5% currently use activity cards, 30% just say no, and some people in the comments were like, hey, for those wondering what it was, I Googled it, and this is it. So I think there are many people right now with the PS5 who don't even know what it is. So on one hand, I understand why Sony's like, yeah, maybe it didn't really work out with activity cards, no one's using them. But on the other hand, it's like, hey, you probably should have told people more about these things instead of trying to let them figure it out for themselves. But yeah, it makes sense why Sony's moving on, and this might be one of those early features for the PS5 that we look back on 10 years from now. We're like, remember those activity cards? Yeah, it was like when we could load Linux on our PlayStation 3s back in the day. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day, as you're seeing here. This is from Shinobi, who says, Sony is running the Horizon IP to the ground. It feels like Ubisoft with Assassin's Creed. So when it comes to the Horizon IP, the biggest complaint I see online is that, like, Aloy's not a very interesting character, and I mean, look, we're gonna at least get one more game with her to round out the trilogy that we're currently in the middle of right now, with Forbidden West being the latest game in the trilogy. I think if they explore the Horizon world more and jump around maybe in different time periods or go to different areas and they introduce a new main character and see if they can come up with something else there, maybe that's the way you can really continue the Horizon IP through multiple releases even after this trilogy is wrapped up, and still keep it feeling fresh, similar to what we see right now with Ghost of Tsushima to Ghost of Yote. They're jumping ahead in time, and they're also introducing a new character, and maybe they can do something similar there with the Horizon franchise. I mean, really, there's a chance to make a new game inside of that same world, but just make it feel like it's completely unique and different. So that's kind of the hope there, and sort of what I would like to see, because I'm kind of indifferent on Aloy, but I wouldn't mind them shaking things up a bit and moving around at least somewhat in that world. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here today. If you missed yesterday's Newswave, I'll have it up here in a card, or maybe you wanted to check back in on the latest Spawncast episode where we talked about the Game Freak leaks, Mario Party Jamboree, and all kinds of other stuff in games. I'll leave that right below it. Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.